All right, we are so pumped to welcome on to Theater in College Hoops, a man who played under Rollie Massimino at Villanova, a man who has coached in almost every major conference in America. He's crossed paths with damn near every big-time player and coach in the sport of basketball, the author of The Elephant in Our Room and the 10 Superpowers. And look, you may know him best from Inside College Basketball on CBS Sports. We got Chris Walker joining us today. Chris, how you doing, man?
My brother, man, it's an honor to be on the show, and I appreciate you having me. And I know you had Brent Stover from CBS, so hopefully, I don't pale in comparison to him because he's an hard act to follow.
No, he's great, and you nailed it, Chris. Do you mind if I play a little bit of audio from that last episode because I want to just get your reaction?
Be my guest.
All right. Brent, this has been such a blast. I mean, really entertaining. I'm going to get you out of here on this. It's a segment that we ask all of our guests at the end of the program. It's called Bring Them Up on Stage. Is there anyone you have in the college basketball space? It could be outside as well. Love to chat with whomever that you would recommend me reach out to and bug them like I bugged you and get them on to share some stories as you've been so kind to do.
Chris Walker. And make sure you let him know because he will come on. If he didn't make my starting five, but he was my sixth.
I'll let him know that. I'll play the audio.
Please do. Chris Walker. That's next.
Chris Walker.
Oh, man, you can't make that up, man. You just cannot make that up. I love Brent. It's never a dull moment. Ever a dull moment.
How do you leave you out of his starting five, though? That's what I want to know.
I don't know. I think he did it purposely. And he knew that if this interview ever happened, which I'm glad it did, I'm going to make sure I censure him when I see him the next time in New York in the studio. But Brent's a really good friend, and I'm glad to be on the show, and I'm glad that he put me in guys' direction.
Yeah, it's great to have you on, Chris. And where I want to start is pretty much your background and how you got to this point. Right. You've had a fascinating career, an unbelievable trajectory, and it's not lost on me or our audience, about all the spaces you've been in college basketball. Sometimes folks go straight into coaching. Sometimes they go straight into media. Sometimes they're only a player. You've dabbled in all three. So let's start with your playing days, Chris. Can you tell me a little bit about your recruitment with Rollie Massimino and playing in the Big East and growing up in Houston? How did that all work?
You know what? I've been fortunate and blessed. Just a quick story. When I grew up as a kid, a young Black kid in Houston, Texas, I'm going to date myself, the late 70s, early 80s, you wanted to be a baseball player. Get Dave Parker from We Are Family, the Pirates, Willie Stargell, Dusty Baker, and all of the guys at Davey Lopes for the Dodgers, Ozzie Smith for the Cardinals. You wanted to play baseball. And so that was my sport. My grandfather loved it, wanted to play for the Astros. And then all of a sudden, one day, I'll never forget, this gentleman was in the neighborhood and said, you guys need to learn you guys need to learn how to play basketball and learn skills. And no one played basketball when I grew up. Either you play football or you play baseball. And basketball was just a sport that you did in between. So he took me to this high school called Charles H. Milby High School. The coach was named Boyce Honey, legendary coach. I had no idea. I was just happy that I was out of the neighborhood for the day. I go over there. Unbeknownst to me, the coach sees some athleticism in me, and he says, you could get a scholarship one day. And so I never in my wildest dreams ever thought of getting a scholarship to go to college. It just wasn't a part of, something that meant something to me or was important to me in my daily walk. And once I made a decision to leave my neighborhood, my entire area, it's probably almost 20 miles from my high school, from where I live, to go to Milby High School, my whole life changed. And quick story, the first year I was there, I played junior varsity. And back then, junior varsity was a big deal because you play freshman, sophomore, junior varsity. In today's world, kids would never accept that. If you're an elite player, you're playing varsity right away. AAU was not a thing when I was a young kid like it is today. So it's very, very, very different. You learn how to play at the park against the old guys. You know what I mean? That's how you learn basketball. And I freshman year sat on the bench. My freshman year I sat on the bench playing junior varsity, and I quit. I said, hold on. So I'm getting up at 5 a.m. every single day to go to this school that's 20 miles from my house because of an opportunity to maybe get a scholarship, and you don't play me. So right away, I'm the entitled guy. You guys asked me to come here, and you're not going to play me. I'm leaving. Coach comes to my house, changes my mind, says just stick it out, stick it out. So I made this decision when the year was over. Still didn't play the rest of the year. I said, you know what? There was a guy on the team named Thomas Bean. There's certain people. I mentioned Howard Johnson. This next person is Thomas Bean, and he could dunk. I remember he was left-handed. He could dunk. He was a junior. He was older. I took him home with me for the entire summer, right? And in Houston, they don't have gyms. They have these platforms of cement with rims, and they have the beaming sun. And we worked religiously for the entire summer. We probably ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day or ham sandwiches. And then we worked out every single day. And then what we did was when the older guys came home from work, when the sun went down, we played 5-on-5. And
In that
that's how I
humidity
learned.
too, huh?
In that humidity, we played 5-on-5. And that's how I learned how to play. So I worked on my skill set during the day with the drills that I learned. And then I played them. I put them into practice against the older guys. And I went from being a freshman on the JV that never played to starting varsity my sophomore year. And then the rest is history. I was all city, all American, and then ended up getting a scholarship, being a runner-up for Mr. Basketball in the state of Texas with my rival still to this day, Elmer Bennett, who went to Bel Air. He ended up going to Notre Dame. We both wanted to go to Notre Dame because of David Rivers. And that's when I first learned about the recruiting process. He visited the week before me, committed, and I was like, well, what am I supposed to do now? Like, because we both wanted to go there because we loved Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was huge back then. But the other part of this, so the way I got to Villanova, obviously I was recruited by tons of schools. I said to myself, hey, I want to play for an African-American coach. I had a great coach. My coach was white. He was great, but I was in a district with all black coaches. So it was something as a kid, you're like, dang, I came from an all black neighborhood. I went to a school that was not all black. So it was something inside of me that says, man, I want to play for a black coach, right?
So Chris, right now, I bet our audience is like, so he wants to play for a black coach. How the hell does he end up with Rollie Massimino? I'm excited for this one, man.
I feel you. And so I visited George Raveling, right, at USC. Clem Haskins was the head coach at the time at Minnesota. Because I was like, okay, who are the black coaches? So that was the schools I was looking at. And then also, now I will say there was another school I did visit, Rice. I was a smart kid. I had a disabled young brother and had a sister that had cancer. So there was a gravitational, emotional pull. Let me have one school at home, right? Phi Slamma Jamma had passed with the Tito Horford fiasco. That thing had sailed because I was a big Phi Slamma Jamma fan. And then the other team was Georgetown, right? So just a quick story, Georgetown in 1985, when Villanova beat them, every kid growing up during that era, that's when hip hop all of a sudden became a phenomenon, right? And every kid that was black loved the Georgetown Hoyas. I mean, I'm sure white kids had the Georgetown Hoyas stuff on too, but hip hop, every hip hop artist, every black kid is like, I want to play for Georgetown, to the point where I believe Georgetown was an HBCU like Harvard, like Howard, because every kid that played on the team was black and the coach was black. So I never traveled. I didn't know. I'm like, every kid wanted to go play for John Thompson, including myself. So in 85, when Villanova beats them, I cry. I'm like, how the heck did they lose? They had Patrick Ewing. They got the, Georgetown Hoya paranoia, lose to those guys. And that little white dude, you got to be kidding me. And then next thing you know, where do I end up going to school? Villanova University. And the reason why I went to Villanova, and like I said, the core of me was Milby High School. My high school coach, Boyce Honey, who's amazing. It taught me value system. We went to, we had fellow Christian athletes, meetings all the time in his house. We used to go to his house in Galveston as a team. We did a lot of team stuff for camaraderie, and we had a mixture of players on the team from different races, and Villanova reminded me of that. And so at the end of the day, that's why I made the decision. The last part of the decision was when I came down to my last choice, it was Villanova, Georgetown, USC. It was a couple of different schools. Again, I was very focused on where I wanted to go because kids didn't go to school in Texas because of the Big East back then. And I'll shorten this story up. There was a guy that already had signed with Villanova, and he was an unbelievable player, but he played baseball. And what happened was he got drafted in the first round of the MLB draft, and his name was Delino DeShields. So Delino DeShields decided not to go to Villanova, and that opened up the scholarship where they then recruited me the next year, and that's how I got to Nova. So if Delino DeShields stays in college and never goes to play in the MLB, I would have never gone to Villanova. I would end up going somewhere else. How crazy is that?
That's insane. I mean, what I said in the intro how many people you've crossed paths with, and I specified basketball, but you're connected somehow to the DeShields. Great bloodline, by the way.
Oh yeah,
with the DeShields
that
family.
was a true
That's amazing.
story. Yeah, that was definitely true. And then again, playing for Rollie Massimino was an unbelievable honor. In the Hall of Fame, he should be in. He's on the outside on the not the steps, but they have this coaching area that they put together. Where he's a benches, shall I say, but he's going to be in. He should be in. Greatest upset of all times, pre-3-point line. Beat what I still say Patrick Ewing is the greatest player to ever play in the Big East, and the Big East at its zenith. I had a chance. I was probably one of the only players during my time. There was only two other players from Texas in the Big East when I played in the Big East. There was a guy named Reggie Pruitt who played in Houston at Washington High School, and a guy named Anthony Allen who played for the Port Arthur Bumblebees, Lincoln Bumblebees, and he played at Georgetown. But unfortunately, he came to Georgetown when Mourning and Matamo was there, so never really got a chance to play. But I was the only player that if you turn on Big Monday, if you watch, I started for Villanova, that I was actually playing at a high level on Big Monday at Syracuse, #1 in the country, playing against the Hoya Paranoia. And the funny thing is the difference between today's kids and then when I played, I was happy. Like I went back, they teased me at CBS, about, shooting 23s versus Shaq in the NCAA tournament or different things. So I'll go back and look at the history of when I played against Sean Miller for 4 years. He's a head coach, actually 3 years. He's a head coach at Xavier. And I'm sitting there going like, man, I cannot believe the environments that we were in when Doug West getting the pennies thrown at him, or playing at Providence where they're serving alcohol, the hardest place to play, or going to Syracuse in the Carrier Dome and beating them when they're #1 in the country, playing against Mark Macon and Coach Chaney and McGonigal Hall. Like there are some unbelievable stories that I have forgotten about. So, when we're doing this interview, when people ask me, I'm like, and I go back and look at the games, I'm like, dude, you played against Robert Horry. I'm like, what? When they had Jason Caffey, Robert Horry, Roy Rogers at Alabama, Dean Smith, who was a coach in North Carolina, my boy King Rice, who's a head coach at Monmouth. Like the list goes on and on and on. Played against Kenny Anderson 2 or 3 times. Like just a great career. And when you think about it, sometimes you got to like really go back in your history. Like, man, this was fun. So the Big East was an amazing, amazing experience. So when I got off that plane that day in Philadelphia with those cowboy boots on and that blue jean outfit, I had no idea from the Big Five, playing in the Big Five all those years to what I was experiencing. But the Big East tournament was the greatest event. I've said this even as an announcer, the greatest event. To me, it was bigger than the NCAA tournament. The Big East tournament was unbelievable. Still great. But it's just, again, like it's like an old guy talking about Kareem when you talk about LeBron. Oh, he'll never be as great. The Big East was great back then. It was a pleasure. But Coach Massimino, I love him to this day. A lot of things I still use when I'm teaching, even when I'm speaking or thinking about basketball. He's a part of it. And Jay Wright was also on the staff for 4 years. And then Steve Lapis, who's my co-host at CBS, he actually recruited me to Villanova before he left to become the head coach of CBS. And I worked for him at Villanova, and I worked for Jay Wright in Villanova as well.
Incredible, Chris.
Yeah,
you got me nostalgic, man. You really do.
Yeah,
and so I don't even know if I was alive during the early 90s. Like I was, but I wasn't watching basketball. Right. But I know you had mentioned some of the great venues and the players that you've played against. But there is one story that I really need you to share with our audience.
Okay.
when you were in Seton Hall?
Oh, listen, you have to realize the intense rivalry of Seton Hall and Villanova. And this was when Seton Hall was, again, Shaheen Holloway's doing a tremendous job. I love Shaheen. I love when I see the former Big East guys become head coaches. Mike Hopkins is one as well. Red Autry is another guy I played against at Syracuse. And PJ Carlissimo was a head coach at the time. They played at the Meadowlands. We just could not beat them. They were so good. Remember the championship they lost? They got robbed. I still say it till this day with Ramil Robinson knocking down the free throws in Seattle. We're at the Meadowlands. I missed a three to win. Bill Rafter was probably calling the game. I missed a three to win the game. My best friend in college, JB, James Bryson tips it in. We go to overtime. We got a chance to beat the Hall. That's what we call them, the Hall. And this kid this group is just giving me flack the whole game. I'm like, God. And you have to understand the Big East, man. It was intense, you know. I got to look at Russell Westbrook and those guys getting upset with what the fans say. I'm like, man, you couldn't have played in the Big East, bro. You have no idea what, you know, to be at St. John's and to hear the stuff that people will say to you, or Providence or Pitt and Fitzgerald Fieldhouse. I'm making the free throws. I was a really good free throw shooter, high 80% free throw shooter. So I did not like missing them, you know, because I didn't get many of them. So I'm like, you know what? And then, you know, we were going to win the game. Game's over. No one's on the line but me and maybe one of our other teammates. But I missed the second one, made the first one, got my money right, missed the second one on purpose, grabbed the rebound, dribbled around, holding up my finger because I was that player like, we're number one. And then did a beeline for this kid behind the basket, and threw a line drive and just knocked the kid out and sprinted out of the gym. And everyone chased me into the locker room, right? So it was a big fiasco. Got sued, the whole nine. You know, it was a big deal. But I remember Coach Massimino. This just lets you know the intense rivalry of the Big East. John Olive, who I ended up working for, my first job at LMU, I have to go into his office and sit down, and we have to watch the video to see if there was any intent, you know, or if I just, you know, it was an accident. you know, sometimes when you throw the ball in the stands, you're excited. So you can see me, they slow-mo it. I'm dribbling around in a circle. I'm laughing like it's a comedy concert. And I got my hands up and I make a beeline for the kid and I follow through. And you can see the follow through and just boom, knock the kid's nachos and Coke out of his hands. I even found out that was the first Big East game he had ever gone to since he had been at Seton Hall. And then Coach Massimino was looking at it with me, and you can clearly see that there was intent. And Coach Massimino looked at him and says, see, you didn't mean to do it. Get the hell out of here. And walked out of the office. That was the Big East, man. I mean, it's a crazy story. I never should have done that. But that was the Big East Conference. You know, I remember getting a technical foul for stepping up to Alonzo Mourning and just, you know, saying things I shouldn't say, try to intimidate him and stuff. You know, that's the things that you had to do, those type of things back then in the league. Rick Barnes was a head coach at Providence. John Thompson obviously was there. I mean, Lou Carnesecca, right, was a head coach at St. John's. I mean, just the pageantry of that league was just phenomenal.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story, Chris. That's certainly something I might have to reach out to that Seton Hall fan.
Don't do that, man. Nah, don't. Let's let that
let's
lay
sleeping dog
it
lies. All right, I can do that.
Sleeping dogs lie.
So, hey, you mentioned a lot of great coaches just now. And so you've been on the sideline as well. I'm curious to know, take us into your thought process, Chris, of when you stopped dribbling the basketball and you now want to make or pursue a career in coaching. How did that look?
You know what? My sophomore year, I had a great, my freshman year was just, you know, learning process. Sophomore year, tremendous year, preseason, all Big East, going into my junior year, and had a decent junior year, and then got injured, had a knee issue. Didn't stop me from being a starter for my career, but just wasn't the same. And I knew, you know, players know they have a clock, they have a brain, they watch television. They may act like they don't know, and they may, you know, the people around them may seem like they don't understand what's happening or read the tea leaves. But I knew I wasn't going to play in the NBA. And coincidentally, it also was when the NBA went from the number of, I don't know if it was 10 rounds or whatever, but it went to 2 rounds. So I knew I wasn't going to be drafted. You just knew that, right? And so now if it had stayed at 10 rounds or whatever it was before, I can't remember, I probably would have gotten drafted, and then I probably would have tried. I knew I did not want to go to Europe, and I said to myself, I was always a coach on the floor. I was always a guy that knew all the plays, and that was my value as a player, because I could always tell guys where they needed to be, right? And there were players that were more talented. There was a player, I don't want to say his name, but who was more, I thought he was more talented. He was definitely more talented than I was. But, I knew how to run the team. I knew how to engineer the team. And so it was better to have me out there to make it more connected offensively and defensively, because it was very difficult to play for Coach Mass if you weren't a thinker. And Bobby Knight, I love this saying by Bobby Knight. He says, dumb gets you beat more than smart helps you win, right? So, if you want to play for Rollie Massimino and you play Syracuse, and in one possession, you may play 5 different defenses. You had to know from the ball going from one side of the floor to the other, we may be in blue 2 or brown or red, depending on who was on the floor, the location of where they were as well. So you had to be super smart. And with plays, I could call plays without coach even calling the plays, because I knew what he wanted to run. So that was already in me as a player. And then I said, you know what? I had to make a decision. My sophomore year, I was like, maybe my sophomore, junior, I said, you know what? Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'll go play baseball. Maybe baseball was my calling. So I go try for the Astros. Right. I'll never forget this. I go try for the Astros. And that's when I got the ultimate respect. I'm telling everybody watching this, for baseball players. Well, forget about that out of shape, pudgy guy, that hits home runs or whatever. Baseball players are very athletic and they're very fast. And that's what I learned very quickly. They're really good at what they do. They just use different muscles in different ways, but they're very good as well. So we killed that right away. I'm like, baseball, that was my high school days. Let me get back to the basketball court, and let me focus on what I'm going to do after this. Now, interesting enough, a lot of people don't know this. In college, I was a singer in college. So I sung at the Apollo Theater. I thought I was going to be a recording artist. So I was, like you mentioned, I'm a guy of many talents.
Can we get you and Brent to do a duet?
Maybe. He loves to sing Country Road. That's his song. But I got a couple other songs when I go watch him in New York that I say, man, that's my favorite song, man. Let's go. Let's play that song. He's trying to get me up there to do Huey. No, not Huey. What's his name? Oh my God, what's the song? It'll come to me in a second. But it's always a song that he always wants me to get up and sing. And I'm like, nah, bro. I'm gonna just watch you do it. I'm gonna sit here. I can't believe I can't remember the song. I wish I would have prepared, because who is the one guy? Oh my God, the brother that sings country music.
Luke Combs.
Oh no, black guy. Oh my God, what's his name? He sings
Darius Rucker.
Darius Rucker. So what's the one song that Darius Rucker was? It's a really popular song that Brent sings all the time, and he always
Wheel.
Wagon Wheel. There you
go.
So he always wants me to sing Wagon Wheel, and I'm like, no, man, I'm good, man. I'm gonna sit here and watch you do your thing. You're the only one getting paid to do this, so relax, okay? But no, anyway, so I was a singer, sung at the Apollo Theater, thought I was going to have this career. So Coach Massimino leaves. I don't know if a lot of people know this. Coach Massimino leaves Villanova to become the head coach at my last year at UNLV. He replaces Jerry Tarkanian, right? And then John Olive, who was his assistant, becomes a head coach at Loyola Marymount University, where Hank and Bo was. So then I say to myself, okay, I can go to UNLV, but I'll always be little Chrissy Walker to Coach Mass, and it'll probably be hard for me to rise through the ranks. And the reason why I didn't want to go play in Europe or something like that, because I said, you know what, those guys can go to Europe, and in 5 years they're going to need a job, but that means I'll be 5 years ahead of them in the coaching business. So I wanted to get there, accelerate my career. So I go to UNLV and go to LMU and I work with John Olive. And it was a restricted earnings job. That was the title then. It was only restricted in one thing, the money that you made. And that was true, but it wasn't restricted in the hours. But you learned the business. Film exchange. You were working players out. It was constantly in the gym. That was when the Lakers did not have the arena they have now. They played the Forum. So all their practices were at LMU, and every team they played against practiced at LMU. So all of the players that I knew during that time, because I still played, were all my guys. They would work out. Sadell 3, Lloyd Vaught, Derek. I forget what Derek's last name, but he played Xavier. But a lot of those guys all would work out. Magic would come in all the time. I'd open the gym up, call them Buck, and they'd have all the celebrities in running all the courts. So I knew I used to train celebrities. It was a great experience, but it had nothing to do with coaching. So then an opportunity to be promoted came along, and I, after the first year, a coach, went for a different opportunity, and John Oliver didn't promote me, and I was like, can't believe you got me out here, you brought me here, and you didn't promote me. He says, you're not serious. So I didn't know what coaching was all about. I was there to try to further my career in Hollywood and music. So then I said, you know what? I'm taking it serious, taking basketball serious. The next year, another coach left again to pursue an opportunity. It was Tom Pecora, who's now the head coach at Quinnipiac, and he was head coach at Hofstra with Jay Wright. He was on the staff with me. He left to go back east to be the assistant with Jay Wright. And then I got promoted my third year. I want to say my second year or my third year, I got promoted. And then the rest is history. My career took off. And then that's when I honed in, let go of the entertainment world. I used to sing the national anthem at a bunch of different games. And I sang the national anthem at my senior night at Providence. We played Providence. I sung the national anthem, singing the national anthem at Loyola Marymount games. So I thought I was going to be that dude. I thought I was going to be, Jodeci and Boyz II Men. But I had to let it go to focus on the coaching thing. And my career took off, and it was there for 20 years. But the one story I'd like to tell is that when you get that opportunity as a mid-major coach, and now you're trying to say to yourself, how am I going to get to that next level, the Power 5 level? So what I did was I surrounded myself with guys at the time that I thought were the strong role models for me as a young African-American coach, my black coach, like Charles Payne, who was at Cal Berkeley at the time. Michael Hunt was at Tennessee. Frank Hayes, I think Frank was at Wake Forest. Ricky. Oh my God, I can't remember Ricky's names right now. He played at Virginia back in the day. Ricky Stokes was at Wake Forest. I can't remember where Frank Hayes was. He was at Texas or somewhere. But those guys were the nucleus of the guys that I looked up to. And so Jan Van Bredekoff, at the time, was at Vanderbilt, lost an assistant, was looking for a young, brash assistant, right? And I get a call, and I'm like stoked. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, Vanderbilt. I didn't really know anything about Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt in the SEC, great opportunity. So I prepare, have this great conversation with them. I prepare my books, with our young secretary at the time, or executive assistant, Kimmy. I still remember her name, Kimmy. We put all these books together. I fly out to Nashville. We're in this house. I'm doing this presentation. I think I got it willy-nilly. I'm working my thing. They call it good talker walker. I'm doing my whole little spiel. And he says, you got the job. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He said, I actually hired you after I talked to you on the phone. I'm like, wow, okay, that's pretty cool. He said, but I got one thing to tell you. I said, what's that? He says, you misspelled Vanderbilt. I'm like, what?
Oh,
so,
no.
so on every document, Vanderbilt spelled Vanderbilt. And it was a quick turnaround to get out to Nashville. And so the young lady that was helping me, I don't know if I told her to spell it that way or whatever, but we spelled it Vanderbilt.
Oh my! How many documents? How many times do you think Vanderbilt was said in those documents? Like thousands?
Thousands, probably.
Oh,
Written everywhere. And it just goes to show you, and that's why I respect Jan Van Bredekoff, who till this day I believe is one of the smartest coaches. And I don't like the way his career ended. He didn't get his just due to me. Obviously, his dad, Coach Will Chamberlain, back in the day with the famous "You're not going back in" game with the Lakers. But he was a great vessel because he gave him a chance to grow as a coach. And really get some responsibility, made me the youngest associate head coach in the SEC at the time at like 26 years old. So he really allowed me to grow, and I learned the game because I'd always been a Villanova guy, with Rollie and John Olive, and I learned the game a different way through him, to be innovative, not to be afraid to be daring, to look at the world of analytics and just the way you see the game. He was a pioneer in my mind in that regard. But yeah, so think about how many people probably would not have gotten a job if they misspelled it. Probably would have dismissed them right away. So I always, because think about it, my career could have been stopped right there. Not stopped, but just the GPS of success certainly would have taken a different direction. But I've always thanked them for that. But that's my one story that I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe that I did that. But you know what? I had a chance to work for some great coaches. I worked for Steve Alford, who played in Indiana. I worked for him in New Mexico. We had great success. I worked for Jay Wright. The Hall of Famer Jay Wright.
Yeah.
I worked with Steve Lapis, who was a tremendous coach in the Big East. Coach Curry Kittles and Tim Thomas, Alvin Williams, and those guys won a Big East championship when the Big East was probably still in its heyday. With those, actually, it started to expand then. But and I worked for Billy Gillespie, who was a great tactician, tough defensive-minded coach that coached at A&M, had success there. And I worked for Wyking Jones at Cal Berkeley. The Cal Berkeley experience wasn't so great. Great place to live, but they got some work to do athletically on the athletic department to get that thing to a different level. But other than that, it's a great university and an opportunity. But again, my career has been tremendous from the standpoint of the people that I had a chance to be associated with, but more importantly, learn from, because that's what coaching is all about. You work with certain people, you get to learn from them. And these guys were very successful men, and they had an imprint on me. And again, when you see me on CBS or anything I'm doing on the podcast, a lot of that information that I'm regurgitating is stuff that's been, again, I put my own spin on it, but it's things that have been poured into me, and I wear that with a badge of honor for sure.
That's awesome, Chris. I think after this, I'm going to take some time to let these two stories marinate, the Seton Hall story and the Vanderbilt story. And I'm going to find out and determine which one is my favorite. I mean, those are awesome, Chris. Hey, so what I want to do now is pivot a little bit to today's landscape here in college basketball. And I was watching you Wednesday night. Great show. If you're not watching, watch Inside College Basketball. It's the best college basketball show out there, really. But so Wednesday night, and I'm watching this, and Gary Parrish said something that aligned with my thoughts. I was like, this is going to be a sleepy Wednesday night. I'll obviously be watching the games, but I don't expect anything earth-shattering to happen. And then Chicago State went into Welsh Ryan and beat Northwestern. And then UNLV handled Creighton. Now, Creighton and Northwestern, two top 25 teams, not only losing to teams that you would think are straight up worse than them, but there's UNLV and Chicago State were sub 500 teams, like not even just average teams or anything like that. Can you help us make sense of those two results, Chris? Because I know UNLV Creighton was on CBS Sports Network too.
It was. And listen, people sometimes, they get mad when I say football is very different than basketball. Like, they don't understand FBS, FCS, where there's only I don't know, you would probably know the exact numbers of just a tad bit over 100 teams that have a chance to play, not even for the championship, but that consider themselves FBS. I think it's FBS, right? And then in basketball, that's 360. But also in basketball, we have an AAU system where kids are accustomed to playing against these guys all their lives, right? And now enter the transfer portal. Now enter NIL, where guys can transfer up and down, grad transfer. I mean, again, football, they do it too, but it's not the same where the NBA pursuit, where guys think they're one and done. They don't have the same, football doesn't have the same allure at the high school level. It does if you're like a big football fan and, an SEC and all that. But from a basketball AAU perspective, basketball is king, right? Kids are stars like you wouldn't believe in basketball, right? Zion Williamson was a star long before we knew about who he was at Duke. Like that's just what it is because of the internet and the way things are done now today. So I say that to say, when you get to college basketball, guys have played at 3 schools. You could be a kid who's an All-American at Creighton, and you're playing against the Boone brothers who've played at Oklahoma State. Keelan and Caleb Boone, they played in the Big 12. They're not worried about what's going on at Creighton, And so, then you got a bunch of transfers, right? Also, Creighton lost Kaluma, They lost Nemhard. I'm sorry, Nemhard to Gonzaga, and then again they bring in some other players, right? But you're on the road. People don't know this. Creighton played in a MTE the year before, last year. They lost 2 games in Vegas. So there's something about the desert. There's something about the casinos. When they go there, they just don't play well. And we're talking about the heels of what happened at UNLV with the shooting. So there's a feel good. Kevin Kruger's a really good coach. They've had some transfers like crazy. They've taken advantage of the transfer portal, but I always say the transfer portal, take it, you give it, then it's take it away. And they were waiting for Keelan to get eligible. And it's all about in college basketball coming together at the right time. Winning is very fragile. So look at Creighton. The 2 teams they've lost to, which are Colorado State and UNLV, both Mountain West teams. Yeah. The Mountain West is a very good league. They got 5 teams to go to the tournament the last 2 years. So that league is no slouch. The problem is, unless these leagues play each other, you never know who's who. But you only find that out during the NCAA tournament when it's one and done, right? So Creighton, a team that shoots threes, I say to myself, listen, all UNLV has to do is shorten possessions. But they got to score. They haven't shot the ball well, but it's a neutral site game in Henderson, Nevada. And Creighton traditionally doesn't play well there. And lo and behold, at some point, the hot streak's going to end, and they're in a dogfight. And so the crazy thing is with Kalkbrenner inside being the Big East Defensive Player of the Year, they dominated them in the paint. It's just and they shot the ball well. It's just one of those nights. So I say this to say I'm being garrulous, but at any given night, other than football, in any given night, you can be beat. There's what they call guarantee and buy games. People would schedule the MEAC and the SWAC, right? I call the Pac-12 the SWAC 12 because I believe that the SWAC actually demolished the Pac-12
last year.
That's what exactly, and that's why the Pac-12 disbanded. I mean, I make that joke, but I'm like, they never should have scheduled that because that was the beginning of the end. Well, you look at the scores this year, the SWAC and the MEAC. Look at the teams in those leagues. They're beating teams traditionally they never beat. You know why? Transfer portal. It has changed the game. And in basketball, right, unlike football, these guys are moving. It's like musical chairs. Move in conference, move out of conference. They want to play because of the pursuit of the NBA. Period. I don't care what anyone says. It's not NIL. Pursuit of the league. So now what happens is every team's a dangerous team. And in Chicago State, I saw them in Cancun when I was doing that event. And I was like, I mean, these guys are pretty good. I remember sitting with Morgan State's head coach. I'm like, hey, listen, they're pretty good. Kevin Rhodes, I tell you, that team's pretty good, man. I know they've probably had some administration issues and financial issues, and they're still independent. But that coach has put together a good team, and they're pretty good. And I've kind of been watching them a little bit. And this was coming. I remember talking to one of DePaul assistants. I said, listen, man, I know you guys are struggling a little bit, but trust me, do not overlook Chicago State. This is the week I said, do not overlook these guys. I've seen them live. They're pretty good. And lo and behold, Northwestern, after beating Purdue, goes in. I don't want to say lay an egg, because the one thing I don't like to do, because I've been that team where people have kind of not disrespected, but looked past. We played in the NCAA tournament, and I talked glowingly about Coach Massimino. We're playing Indiana, right? We were the first team in WCC history to get an at-large bid. We win the league, but we lose the championship in Santa Clara to Gonzaga when they had like Matt Santangelo and Richie Fromm and those guys back in the day. We had a kid named Brandon Armstrong who ended up being a first-round draft pick. Just a talented upperclassman team. And I remember sitting next to Coach Mass before we were going to play him. He said, "You guys got no shot." I said, "Coach, we're going to beat them 20." He laughed at me, and we went out there and we smoked Indiana. And coincidentally, that was the last game that Bobby Knight ever coached at Indiana, because the incident happened the next fall on campus. So I've been that underdog team, and I've been there, when you have to do those things. Mm-hmm. And you hate being disrespected, because you had to watch film. To beat a team for 40 minutes is not easy. When they got everything, when the deck stacked against you and they got all the stars and all the accolades, right? But as someone always says, you don't get credit for what you're projected to do. You only get credit for what you do. So if you look past certain teams, which is what's happening in college basketball, nothing surprises me. JMU going into Michigan State. If you watch JMU and you look at their roster and you look at Mark Byington as a coach and Terrence Edwards Jr. and you look at TJ Bickerstaff and Michael Green, you're like, oh man, they can beat them. Noah Friedel, and you look at like they could beat them.
Yeah.
And so nothing surprises me, shall I say, in college basketball. And I always, and Brent laughs at me and I says, the first thing there's two things I look at. As soon as I get a box street, I see it upset. The first thing I do is say, what did they shoot from three? And usually, I'm not saying I'm always right, 8.5 times out of 10, the other team was terrible from three. They took too many threes. They missed a bunch. They lost.
Yeah.
That's what happens because you think you're going to blow them out. So you come out just gunning and gunning and gunning. And next thing you know, you're in a tight game and they have nothing to lose and you have everything to lose. So you play tight, they play loose. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think we saw that. I think we saw that with UNLV. One of the things I really love that you mentioned about the Boone twins coming over from Oklahoma State. I think it was in the post-game interview with Pete Gillen. I think it was Keelan who was asked about 3-point shooting, or I don't know, just maybe the opponent. He specifically referenced Baylor. And he said it in a very polished, refined way, but I took it as him basically saying, Pete, I've played Baylor before, man. Like he's mentioned, like Creighton's great. And I'm not putting any words in his mouth, but it was a fun Wednesday night for sure, Chris. And so staying on this topic of the current landscape of basketball, what I always find fascinating, Chris, over the course of my time watching the game, which has probably been since like 2000, right? So I got 23 years, certainly not your pedigree, but I got 23 years of watching the game and seeing the changing landscape as it relates to roster construction. I think it's super interesting to me because it ebbs and flows between, freshmen, or do you want a senior laden team, or is it guard play that's going to help you, or is it going to be big man play? Now we got the transfer portal and everything. So in today's 2023, Chris, at a high level, if you were to construct what you think would be a potent team, a team that can go to a Final Four, and you take all of those criteria, I suppose, into account, what are you looking for? What are you prioritizing?
First of all, you got to prioritize experience. That's number one. I think I marvel at what John Calipari was able to build by bringing in 5-star athletes. And even he's, going back to that, like he tried it with the Xavier Wheelers and the Jacob Toppins, and that just didn't work, because, Jacob Toppin was is wearing a jersey that was once worn by Kid Gilchrist or Anthony Davis or Julius Randle. And then Xavier Wheeler is wearing a jersey that John Wall, Tyrese Maxey, De'Aaron Fox, Jamal Murray wore. It's not the same. Mm-hmm. But what I will say is there's still good players like those guys that are coming out. You just can't replace them with guys that are older. Not at that level, the elite level. I still think you need stars. That's just what I believe. So if you're talking about winning a national championship, now FAU has certainly challenged that. Dusty May has done a tremendous job with getting a group of guys with some synergy, connectivity that are talented enough and a couple transfers and got to the Final Four, right? I think that's an anomaly, but who knows? That may be the new landscape of college basketball. San Diego State did it the exact opposite way. They have a bunch of transfers and they have a ton of experience. And we always got to realize COVID had a lot to do with that because there's COVID seniors. So you have guys that are, again, a year older. So I would ask you, would you rather have a kid who's a freshman who had just played high school last year or a kid that's 25 years old? It really doesn't matter how talented this kid is. This other kid has 5-6 years of game experience. And if you're talking about getting to the shining pedestal, the moment of playing in the Final Four, you got to have experience, right? You got to have experience. Now, you got to have talent as well. You got to have some guys, as Jerome Tang would say, or Scott Drew, it doesn't matter what X and O you draw there. It's what the X and O's can do, right? So you got to have guys that can actually play the game. I actually think you mentioned it earlier before you talked about how to build that roster. Like the coach has to be comfortable with the current landscape of how to put this gumbo together. You can't be locked into, I can only recruit these type of guys. I can only recruit these type of guys because your competition is changing the game. So the question is, it's nothing wrong with being a fast follower. It says, I got to mix this up a little bit. my colleague John Rothstein coined this phrase, player retention, is the thing. And you see Marquette, player retention is huge. Shaka Smart's been able to do that. But again, you're talking about a unicorn. Who else is doing that? It's very hard to retain all those guys with NIL in the portal because they can play right away. It used to be you had to sit out a year, do a year of residency. You don't have to do that anymore. And with the ruling yesterday, with the kid Raekwon Battle from West Virginia, you may be able to transfer every single year without penalty. Now, talking about a smorgasbord or trying to discombobulate the system, that will certainly do it. But as I tell people all the time, they will adjust because for every kid leaving, another kid is coming.
You got to adjust.
Yeah.
Like you ain't got much choice.
You ain't got much choice. So not to be roundabout, but you got to have experience. You got to have talent. You got to have a stomach for what the business has become. And I actually think you got to find some young stars, right, to be able to, you can't just, there's certain guys that are just comfortable with the training portal and just retooling every year. I need 10 new guys. I need 10 new guys, and, it's hard to do it that way. And you know who started this? My man at Arkansas.
It was the first one that came to my mind.
Must started this at Nevada. He was the one that started, the trend. I give him credit.
Because I think the Martin twins were transfers.
The Martin twins were transfers from NC State and among others. But what it was people always thought of transfers in a negative light. Oh, it must be something wrong with him. That's why he's coming. He's this, he's that. Probably a bad student, probably a bad kid. That was the cloud that hung over transfers back in the day. So a lot of kids would not transfer. And a lot of kids did not want to sit out, right? But what also came out of transferring was grad transferring, because now you got an extra year to graduate. So now when you can graduate and become a grad transfer, you can go to another school. So that's also what's changed. So again, NIL's changed. Well, I can go where I can get the most, compensation. The transfer portal, I don't have to sit out anymore, right? Grad transfer, I can graduate and go play somewhere else. Those things all change college basketball. The other thing is Division II. No one would ever think of bringing kids from Division II, right? No, not that South Dakota State was Division II and Blake Shireman was that, but there was never talk of bringing guys from lower levels that were the better players and think like a Lance Jones could be at Purdue,
Dalton Connect at Tennessee.
Dalton Connect, that just wasn't the modus operandi of higher level basketball. So it is the landscape is all over the place. So to answer your question, everything's in play when you're trying to build a program, but you need guys that can score. You need guys that are tough. You need guys that can defend, and you need guys that can think. You cannot play with, I tell people this all the time. I tell young parents, I used to coach AAU. I used to run AAU for Adidas and Under Armour, and I see where the problem begins. The problem begins with entitlement, right? I always say this. I never have a problem with player empowerment. I have a gross problem with player entitlement. Never a problem with empowerment. Get paid, right? Problem with entitlement. You should get it no matter what, And so that's kind of what's, fogging up the system right now. And they got to get some things cleaned up. But it's going to be harder. It's going to get harder before it gets good. But you see some of these teams like your alma mater, Arizona, Keyshawn Johnson. Caleb Love. Let's just be honest. Jared Bradley.
Yeah. You talk about not only just games under their belt, big time games under their belt,
games under their belt,
4 games under their belt. So I'm loving it so far.
Yeah, who's to say? You guys get, you're number one in the country. You're not number one without those 3 guys. Not saying that Tommy Lloyd can't get some other guys, but that is huge. So you can use it to your advantage. It's a tool. You can decide not to do it. You can take freshmen, but when the other guys are doing something different than you know what you say? Wow, maybe we need to get into that. So when Dabo Swinney and those guys complain, I laugh. I'm like, hold on. So you get the best players because you have the best facilities, and now the best facilities are not the thing that's at the top of the list anymore.
That's right.
It's other things.
He's very much 10 toes deep in his thoughts, and you got to adjust. We've seen all these coaches adjust, and I think that's what you got to do if you want to continue coaching, right? If that's still your passion, you got to adjust to this landscape.
You got to adjust. But my thing is, and it all comes back to kids being compensated. I'm like, it was wrong when it didn't happen before. Like anybody that can sit there and say it's just and say, well, they're getting an education. Well, anybody that's gotten a job after college and want to make that commensurate to what an athlete has to do at the highest level or at any level. If to say that's not a job and not to besmirch kids, I'm just saying the athlete, period. Forget
I'm
about,
with you.
basketball and football, which are the true revenue generators, just any sport, right? The Olympic sports as well, the time and energy they put in, you're damn right they should be compensated. What level they get compensated at and how they do it, they can figure that out. But surely they bring value to universities.
Yeah, that's a super insightful answer, Chris. And like I said, it's in 5 years, roster construction. Who knows what's going to come down the chute, and you're going to have to adjust. So I'm looking forward to that. But Chris, what I want to do is have a little fun, do some quick hitters here before we get you on out of here. Okay. And like I said, let's just have some fun here. Were you more nervous your first game playing, your first game coaching, or being on TV? First time being on TV.
Ooh, man, that's a good one. First game playing. I don't remember the first game I ever played. We lost to Southern Illinois. All right, in the NCAA in the Bahamas. I want to say in Puerto Rico. The Salukis were number 8 in the country. So embarrassed about that because I had no idea what I was getting myself in the middle of. Coaching the first game, I don't remember. I wasn't. Is he mean the head coach or an assistant coach?
We'll say head coach.
The head coach.
Yeah.
And then the last one is what now?
First time being on TV.
Definitely first time being on TV because I had no idea what I was doing. Thankful CBS gave me an opportunity. I love working for them. You just, the one thing about being on TV, man, you have to learn your space. You have to learn where you fit. You listen to Dickie V, and I'm like, well, I'm not going, oh, baby, I can't do that. And, I don't want to be, super dry like some other guys and monotone. And so the question is, how do you fit in? So I would definitely have to say, because I never had been coached or anything. They just put a mic, put a jacket on and says, go.
Yep.
So I would definitely have to say being on TV was probably my most nervous of the 3.
Well, you've certainly overcome it. You're a natural on TV.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I always ask this question to folks that come on, and you've been so kind to detail what it was like playing in the Big East, all the crazy venues, but I'm going to go the opposite direction here, Chris. Was there ever a consistently bad place to play in the sense that there was no juice, no crowd? I'm talking about strictly your playing days. Like, was there anything that came to mind where you're just like, how do I even get up for this game?
Listen, and I don't want them to be mad when I say this. The place that I hated, Dana Barros. I don't know if you remember Dana Barros.
I'm a Celtics fan. I love Dana Barros.
Barros. So when one of the joys of the Big East was being able to play in NBA arenas. That was part of their selling thing. So when you played St. John's, you played in the Garden. When you played the Hoyas, you played in the Cap Center. When you played Boston College, you play in the Garden. Well, the year that I came to the Big East, they stopped playing in the Boston Garden. We played in the Spectrum, right, where the Sixers were. And so we'd have to play in this new arena they had called Conte Forum. It was cold. They had hockey there. I hated playing at Boston College. That was the one place I'm like, we got to play BC. You just hated them. And they weren't, again, they ended up being really, really good when Al Skinner was there.
Yeah.
And I think that, I forget his name. He used to be the head coach of Ohio State. Gary, what's Gary's last name? But they were decent.
Yeah.
The name of coming, he was a coach at Ohio State. I don't want to say before or after BC, but I just hated playing there.
Hey, I'll tell you,
it was just not. I think he was a coach there when I played. Oh my God, I can't remember Gary's last name, but I just didn't like it at all. At all. It was the worst. Can't hear you. I lost you.
I have asked this question to some Big East and ACC folks. This isn't the first time Conti's come up.
No way.
No, I promise you. It's not the first time Conti's come up.
I have to look up who the coach is at BC. I'll let you ask the next question because I got to make sure that because I can't remember his name, but I tell you, I hated that. I hated that place.
They did have and I can look this up as well, Chris. You're good.
Yeah.
But, I did grow up in the Massachusetts area
okay.
during the Jared Dudley years.
Oh,
and the Craig Smith, man, they were so much fun. So let's see here. Was it Gary Williams?
Gary, yes, that's who it was. Was it Gary Williams?
Was it Gary? I mean, I don't think it's that like the Maryland Gary Williams. It was the Maryland Gary Williams, and then it went to Jim O'Brien.
Jim O'Brien. Oh,
Okay.
no, I think it was Jim O'Brien. Jim O'Brien. Because Jim O'Brien, I think, ended up coaching Ohio State, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're right.
Jim O'Brien's, or it either came from or whatever, but Jim O'Brien was there during that time. It was,
That's
I
funny.
hated it. I really, really, really hated that place. But
that is
it was
something
like
else.
Cold. You know what I mean? Just the gym, the hockey. Anyway, you bring back bad memories, man.
I'm sorry.
Now the hardest place was Providence because they served alcohol. Those were the most brutal fans. But the place, apathetic was BC for sure.
We got some Providence fans that listen to this pod, so I'm gonna clip that and send it to them. They love it. Yeah, I mean it's a tough arena to play in. Speaking of tough, though, toughest guy you've had to guard.
Oh my God! See, I played against Chris Jackson. I played against played against Sherman Douglas as a young kid. Played against Kenny Anderson. I mean, I played against them all, man. I played against King Ray. The toughest guy to guard was Carlton Screen from Providence. Played against Chris Smith at Connecticut. Just played against some great guards, right? Red Archery. But Carlton Screen from, Providence, man, that dude, man, he used to drive me nuts. He was very tough, quick. Paco, they call him, from New York. But he was a tough guard. So tell those Providence guys, I'm done with them. Hey, I love Providence. But I used to give him the business now. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
Now, I give him a little work, but he was definitely tough to play against.
That's awesome. I mean, some of the names you're dropping, Chris, have just I'm speechless.
Back in the day, man. Back in the day. I'm just,
it's so
what I mean?
cool.
I'm old. I'm just old.
Nah.
That's all it is.
Nah, it's cool though. Hey, so I've gotten to know you over the last couple of weeks, and obviously during this interview, and it's been great. But this is the pivotal question that's going to tell me everything I need to know about you, Chris. We're in the holiday season. Are you an eggnog guy or no?
Not an eggnog guy. Listen, born on Christmas though. Born
okay.
Christmas Day. So my birthday's coming up. Won't tell you how
Happy
old
early
I am,
birthday.
I appreciate that. But just not an eggnog guy, man. Never really got into it. You know what? But since you said that, I think I'm gonna take a couple of sips and sample it out this year. But never been an eggnog guy, no.
All right. Hey, I want to get serious for about 2 seconds here. Please tell us about your career in being an author and dipping the pen and writing those 2 books. I think it's super important for our audience to understand the background of you diving into that and these projects, and also the message of these books.
Yeah, it started really from a long time ago, something that's been inside me, looking at my career and my life and watching, having a chance to tutor and mentor young men and working in the community when I was working with sneaker companies and stuff and coaching AAU teams. And I just felt like I had something more to offer to people than just coaching. And I wanted to tell my story, and I wanted to give my perspective, because that's what books are, people giving their perspective on life. It was a project. I was watching Sly Stallone. I know this is funny, but he made a point about, listen, there are a lot of people that do a lot of things, but the bottom line is, I don't care how good a project is. It's all about finishing the project. So what I wanted to do is I was always talking about it, and I live by this mantra that 98% of the people in the world are idea people. Hey, man, I can do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. I should do this. I should do that. And 2% are executionists. And I wanted to make sure that I was in that 2% when it came to writing 2 books. And then I'm working on the 3rd one as well. And the elephant in our room is something I looked at in my community, Black community, where, we have tons of kids who grow up with images of being LeBron and images of being a great Jay-Z, which is phenomenal. But my thing is, the perfect world for me is like, I would love for kids to grow up in a world where they believe that Robert Smith or Obama or maybe they can be a kid who creates a Facebook, or a kid that creates a YouTube. And that's something that's possible and plausible. So I wrote a book called Elephant in Our Room to kind of channel the energy, to be a conversation starter, to get people to invest, forget about the outside noise, invest inside our own community, and try to talk about the problems, but also give some solutions of how we can change some things and just shift the narrative a little bit. Not saying that one is wrong and one is more right than the other, but have an intelligent conversation. The other is born straight out of coaching. The 10 superpowers. I believe that we all have these superpowers. I won't give any of them away. Buy the book. It's on
Yeah, we got to
Amazon.
get the book. That's right.
They're
Yeah.
innate inside of us. And these are 10 things that I learned from the coaches that I've worked for and coaches and guys that I've worked for, work with, and from my high school coach, Boyce Honey, to Wyking Jones, who I coached at LMU, who I end up working for, Cal Berkeley, Jay Wright, Steve Lapis, John Olive, Jan Van Brederkoff, as I mentioned, and Steve Alford. These are all things that I learned being a part of their network and made me grow and develop as a man. So I believe that the 10 superpowers of authentic leadership, that's the thing, one coach told me one time, I won't say his name, he says, I know you think you're wooden, but you need to focus more on being a great leader. And I've always taken that to heart and disseminate that information to anybody I talk to and try to impart that knowledge. I said, hey, it's great to be a coach. Coach, you got to do this. But learn how to lead people, usher in a new world of leaders by your example. And that's what that book symbolizes to me about, being a person, a beacon of light, being someone that, is not afraid to be different, to stand alone. And so, again, those are things that were liberating to purge and get those out. And I'll be speaking. I'll start doing some speaking and really just diving into those things once the season ends from CBS. But I mean, I thank you for bringing those up. But I'll tell you this, not easy. If you've ever written a book and you put your soul out there, you put yourself out there. And but like I said, like those are things that I believe near and dear. And, feel free to criticize and have some fun with it and create some dialogue. But that's the other thing I like to do, too. Even when I do CBS, I like to create dialogue. It's not just about talking about the obvious. When you do a game and they coach us on this at CBS, it's not about what the viewer sees. The viewer, you're doing television, the viewer, it's not like radio. The viewer sees a result. My job is maybe to give some color, because you're a color analyst, to the result. But also let's talk about why the result happened. So now you can educate, not only entertain, but educate the viewer on what's actually happening. So when I write, it's not about talking about, hey, this is why this is happening. This is a cause and effect, right? This is the symptoms of why. But also let's talk about the origin of it. And now let's talk about what we can do to make things better. So that's in a nutshell, but I appreciate you bringing those two things up.
It's magnificent work, Chris. Really, it's truly awesome. So I'm going to get you out of here on this last question. We kicked off the episode with a question that I asked Brent and the question that I ask every one of my guests that have been so kind, like you, to come on, share some amazing stories like you have. Is there anyone you think I should reach out to have them come on and share some stories like you did?
And share some stories. Wow. You want entertaining and colorful and
I trust whatever. I trust your reference, man, because you've been great.
Because it's fresh, and I sit there and I listen to him tell stories, and he's funny, and he's starting his YouTube channel, and I love to give him a hard time about being a Big East guy. If you don't mind having another Big East guy on,
I'd love it.
Roy Meets World. You got to get Roy Hibbert. That's the guy you got to get on. He's entertaining. He's got great stories. And I think he's a young budding analyst, and he's actually this year's going to start doing games and not just doing studio, which I think is great as he's challenging himself. But I think he'd be hilarious. He'd be a great listen for sure.
Roy Hibbert's next on my list. I may tap your shoulder to get in contact with him and bug him like I bugged you. I did see on Wednesday night you were talking about overlooking some teams, and I think you had mentioned you were like, yeah, like Villanova was overlooking Georgetown, and I just saw Roy's face.
That's what's great about it, man. Like that camaraderie and being able to tease him. But I also, as I said before, about not about coaching and leading, the difference between the two. I see myself as somewhat of an elder statesman, not only coaching him up, well, hey man, this is how to be a better broadcaster, but leading him by doing my work and the way I deliver and my professionalism, try to lead as well. So again, as I say, through every phase and aspect of my life, I try to make sure that I show that and do it, as I said before, with a badge of honor. And Roy, I'm telling you, tremendous guy, family man, funny, hilarious, got a bright future.
I'm looking forward to it. Chris Walker, player, coach, leader, media member, singer, author. Did I miss anything else? Thank you so much for jumping on.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you for having me, man.